Cheryl Reeves wanted to run down on Sophie Cunningham pregame and press her about her stance. So it looks like they're having a very intense conversation. And Cheryl Reeve also spoke about what this conversation was about in the post game. I'm going to play that as well. But it looks like they are definitely having a conversation about the whole trans situation. And I just feel like, yo, if Sophie feels like she can, like, she's able to have her opinion. She's able to have her opinion on it. Shit, I agree with Sophie, to be honest with you. Keep it real, like, yeah, whatever. So yeah, they definitely had this battle. I mean, this conversation before the game. Okay, and then you had
Sunday afternoon at Target Center carried more weight than a regular season basketball game usually does. The Indiana Fever were in Minneapolis to face the Minnesota Lynx, the top team in the WNBA standings, but the pregame storyline had almost nothing to do with the scoreboard.
Take a look at this here. ESPN broadcast encourages viewers to go listen to Cheryl Reeve's incredibly thoughtful comments about how biological males should be allowed in girls' sports and locker rooms, and how children should have their bodies mutilated to support gender ideology.
Well, we see Cheryl Reeve wearing a shirt today in support of trans kids. Trans kids belong on the shirt. This in the aftermath of Sophie Cunningham's recent comments. We actually saw Cheryl and Sophie speaking at center court pregame. And yesterday, Cheryl Reeve spent a lot of time talking at length with the media about this topic.
I would encourage anyone to go and listen to Cheryl Reeve's comments. Incredibly thoughtful, easy to find online. And
I think y'all should just be promoting the basketball game. That's the problem with the y'all so busy trying to push everything else. Y'all should just be focusing on the basketball game. We had excellent play out there from 4 great guards, and y'all are talking about her shirt and how
it's centered on a conversation happening at midcourt between Lynx head coach Cheryl Reeve and Fever guard Sophie Cunningham, 2 women who had spent the past several days on opposite sides of one of the most contentious debates in the league. Tension traced back to an ESPN profile published the week before, in which Cunningham said she did not believe transgender athletes should compete against biological girls and women in sports. She pushed back on the idea that her comments amounted to hatred toward trans people.
I think for us, like, you know, it's not really a discussion we really have in our locker room, I think.
So they asked Caitlin Clark initially, because they didn't put the question in it, they asked her about the whole trans thing and how is it distracting the team, etc. And this is her response.
I think for us, like, you know, it's not really a discussion we really have in our locker room. I think it's for leagues and the governing bodies to work with their athletes to find solutions, but our focus is on basketball, and that's what we talk about and how we can get wins, and obviously we didn't do that tonight, so need to find an area to improve in that way.
So she basically called out the leadership, and Kathy, where she said, look, that's on the league. That's basically on Kathy and the leaders of the league to figure that out with the people, and yada yada. That don't got nothing to do with me. That don't have anything to do with me. So she pointed toward the WNBA lack of leadership as well. Now they're gonna try to drag her in it even more. Check this out.
Do you have any, reaction to the?
I just answered for you.
Yep, I don't have nothing.
She said she was trying to protect young girls in locker rooms and on teams from having to compete against biological men, while also saying she wanted to lead with love rather than hostility. The remarks spread quickly, and in the days that followed, rallies both for and against her position began forming outside WNBA arenas. By the time the Fever reached Minneapolis, it was the 3rd straight game to draw that kind of demonstration. Reeve addressed the controversy directly the day before the game, speaking at length with reporters about her own views on inclusion. She said she comes from a space of inclusion and pushed back on what she called a problematic narrative, one suggesting that transgender athletes represent the biggest issue facing women's sports. She rejected the idea that trans women in locker rooms pose a threat to other athletes, calling that framing an innuendo rather than a reality. At the same time, she acknowledged the debate has layers. She talked about the complexity that comes after puberty, in Olympic-level competition, and in situations where scholarships are on the line, saying those are places where reasonable people need to find common ground rather than treating the issue as having one simple answer. That set the stage for Sunday, when Reeve wore a light blue t-shirt reading "Trans Kids Belong" underneath her blazer on the sideline. It was hard to read the timing as anything but deliberate, arriving one day after her comments to the media and directly ahead of a game against Cunningham's team. Before tip-off, Reeve and Cunningham were seen having a conversation at midcourt. Accounts of the moment vary slightly in tone, with most describing it as calm and even cordial, though at least one report characterized it as fairly animated. What was said between them was not made public, but both sides appeared composed rather than hostile once the cameras caught the exchange, the national broadcast noticed. ESPN on ABC play-by-play announcer Ryan Ruocco pointed out the shirt during the call, noting it read "Trans Kids Belong" and tying it to the ongoing story around Cunningham. Color commentator Rebecca Lobo added a brief endorsement, telling viewers she would encourage anyone interested to go back and listen to Reeve's comments from the day before, calling them incredibly thoughtful. It was a short acknowledgement rather than an extended detour from the game, but it was enough to keep the storyline alive across social media through the afternoon. On the court, Minnesota controlled most of the game. Rookie Olivia Miles led the Lynx with 28 points as Minnesota improved to the best record in the league. Kelsey Mitchell kept Indiana competitive with 37 points of her own, but it wasn't enough to overcome the deficit, and the Lynx won 108-100. Cunningham had a quiet night statistically, finishing with 3 points on 1 for 2 shooting, 1 rebound, and 2 assists in 23 minutes. The loss dropped the Fever to second place in the Eastern Conference, behind Angel Reese and the Atlanta Dream. After the final buzzer, Reeve was asked about the pregame conversation and the shirt. She kept her answer measured, saying it was great that she and Cunningham both understood they have platforms and that the goal for both of them was more than anything to educate people. She acknowledged the two of them likely see some things the same way and differ on others, but framed that as normal rather than as a rift, saying it comes down to how people choose to handle disagreement. She added that it was nice to have the conversation in person. Reporters then turned to Caitlin Clark, who had said nothing publicly about Cunningham's comments in the week since they surfaced. Asked directly about her teammates' stance, Clark said it wasn't a topic the team discussed in the locker room. She said she believed responsibility for working through issues like this belongs to the leagues and governing bodies, not to players trying to focus on winning games. She pointed to the loss itself, saying the Fever's attention needed to be on finding ways to play better rather than on the surrounding debate. When a reporter pressed her further for a more direct reaction, Clark responded simply, "I just answered." It wasn't confrontational, but it made clear she had no interest in expanding on the topic beyond what she had already said. Clark's response drew a mixed reaction online. Some fans and commentators criticized her for not more directly backing Cunningham, arguing that her silence read as distancing herself from a teammate under fire. Others felt the opposite, arguing she was right to keep her comments focused on basketball rather than wading into a subject that falls outside her role as a player. Neither reaction reflects an official league position, but the split itself became its own talking point across WNBA social media in the hours after the game, with fans on both sides framing the moment as evidence of where they believe the league's priorities should lie. Reaction to Reeve's shirt followed a similar pattern. Supporters framed it as a coach using her platform responsibly, standing behind a group of young athletes she believes are being unfairly targeted in the broader conversation around Cunningham's comments. Critics saw it differently, arguing that a head coach wearing a message like that into a nationally televised game against a specific player's team crossed a line between personal advocacy and professional conduct, regardless of the topic. Some fans took to comment sections questioning why a coaching staff member would use game day attire to respond to a player's personal comments at all, while others pushed back, arguing Reeve had every right to express her view the same way Cunningham had expressed hers to a national outlet weeks earlier. The broader context matters here. Cunningham's comments did not arrive in a vacuum. Rallies had already formed outside Fever games in the days before the Minnesota matchup, some in support of her position and others opposing it, turning warm-ups and pregame arrivals into something closer to a demonstration zone than a routine part of game day. That backdrop is part of why Sunday's meeting between Reeve and Cunningham drew so much attention in the first place. It wasn't an isolated moment. It was the latest entry in a storyline that had been building publicly for rootsy 2 weeks, one that has increasingly pulled the WNBA's biggest stars into a conversation many of them, including Clark, have been visibly reluctant to enter. What happens next likely depends less on anything said Sunday and more on whether Cunningham, Reeve, or league officials choose to address it further as the Fever continue their push for playoff positioning. For now, the league has offered no formal statement on the exchange, leaving fans, media, and the players themselves to interpret Sunday's moment on their own terms. Whether that silence from the league office is read as restraint or avoidance appears to depend largely on which side of the debate a given fan already falls on, a divide that shows no clear sign of narrowing as the Fever and the rest of the WNBA head into the final stretch of the regular season.